there, but I'm not one of those people that knew what they wanted to do when they were 14 years old and started getting up and practicing 8 hours a day. That's definitely not me. I mean, one of the things about having a musical family, and if you're an angry adolescent boy, which is the only thing I can speak with authority about, is that one of the things I rebelled against in a certain way was music.
All right, okay.
So, I was also playing punk rock bands.
Yeah.
And that especially from where my parents are coming from was kind of the end is like anti-music.
Right, yeah.
And I still, even though I don't listen to that for enjoyment, I think a lot of the ethos of that is in me. And and I look for that. I find it. In other things. For me, there was a big turning point with really deciding to get serious about jazz also when I started to see jazz music as kind of like the most... how do I even say this? I mean, in the context of American society, jazz music is the greatest disruptor and also combiner of our culture, and we have a real big problem. Always have. Everybody else in the rest of the world can see it a lot more clearly because we've got more perspective. Mm-hmm. But the problems that we have in our society, particularly around race and around the legacy of slavery in the United States, is it's literally tearing our country apart right now.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's just never being addressed in an honest way. Yeah. By our country, by our government, by our society, at least parts of our society that are holding power. And so to me, in a lot of ways, jazz is the answer. Mm-hmm. and is also from in my more adolescent view of like why I was drawn to punk rock music was because I was like, man, things are messed up, or I'm messed up or whatever, and I want to express that. Yeah. And I want to talk about it. I want to do that. And I'm really glad that I was able to learn some of the things that I was able to learn about jazz in a social context, mm-hmm. and especially, what was going on with jazz and the civil rights movement in the United States. All of that, really was what really turned me on, that and the album cover of Sonny Rollins with the mohawk. Yeah. And I've told this story before, and, this is a little bit of an insight probably into my 15, 16-year-old brain, which was that, so I wasn't really into punk rock. I was really into skateboarding, and the punk rock kind of came along with it as sort of an attitude, mm-hmm. It's kind of part of the whole thing. Like, you can't listen to like the modern jazz quartet and be skating on the ramp,
No, you're right.
Working on rad tricks. Yeah. I mean, you could, and I could go on and on and on about how, skateboarding. I love skateboarding. I'll just say, I really, really love it. Do you still do it? I don't do it anymore because of the car accident that I was involved in when I was in college. But I love it so much that, if I'm going by a skate park and I'm not pressed for time, I'll just stop and just watch, because I still feel it. I feel it in every fiber of my body. Yeah. And it's to me a great skateboard run, and this would be the same thing for a surfer, a skier, or anybody that does something like that. It's kind of a physical representation of a lot of what happens in the brain when you're improvising through the form of a tune. Yeah. You're picking lines, picking directions, altering certain vectors and expressing yourself in that way. Anyway, I've gone off the deep end here, but
no, it's good to do that.
skateboarding, punk rock. And so then my dad had this record set My dad was really at the time that I was getting into, more of the jam, like the contemporary jam sessions. He was, really into Chet Baker, Jerry Mulligan. The West Coast kind of cool jazz cats, as they may have been branded. And he had this record set of Sonny Rollins with Clifford Brown, and they used to put out, so much of people can't also imagine this now. Like young people can't imagine things being out of print.
Yeah,
But I mean, a lot of my jazz education, or when I was coming up, I would say half of the records that people would recommend that I would listen to, I mean, and even at the time that they were, CDs or whatever, you just couldn't get them. You would have to find a teacher that had an old record that they would then play it onto a tape or later onto a CD for you. So there were all these bootleg things coming out, just these silly things that were just incorrect. They did this with CDs too. It'd be like Sonny Rollins, on Prestige, and then it would show a picture of Sonny Rollins with a giant afro in 1977 on the cover. Just stupid stuff, just totally ignorant slapdash kind of stuff. So this record set was all the sides that Sonny Rollins and Clifford Brown cut together, but there was this, a beautifully reproduced picture, because this was a record set, so there were like 3 or 4 records in a box, right? And it was a picture of Sonny after he came back from the bridge. So this was all the Clifford stuff was in the 50s, the mid and the late 50s, and this is a picture of Sonny in like 1962. And he was, he's like super buff.
Yeah.
And he's got on this herringbone coat. It may even be double-breasted. He may have even been wearing a cravat or some sort of a thing like that. And he had a mohawk. And when I saw that, when I was about 15 or 16 years old, because I thought to myself, that is the most punk thing that I've ever seen. I
think I've got it up. Is he like wearing? Is he wearing? It looks like a black. No, it looks. This. I don't think this is the same one. Black velvet.
Yeah, there's definitely many pictures of him with the mohawk. I mean, he sported it for a few years. It was kind of his look. It's just kind of funny how that was actually the thing that influenced me to listen to that, and that was when I really first started listening to bebop and perceiving that the way that I was hearing melodic ideas was not what was on this record. And then I really did get stumped. That was really tough. That was my first dose of humility.
Right.
Of just like, man, I'm not putting this together, of how this is working.
Sure.
And amazingly enough, we had this new conductor. This is the first female conductor of the Central Kentucky Youth Orchestra.
Yeah.
And I was the concert master of doing my classical thing.
Yeah.
And her husband is a fantastic jazz pianist and composer. And he had been sort of sidelined with an illness the first year that she was there, which was my last year in high school. And he had been really stuck in their house for a long time, was getting really, was not in a good place. And she knew that I was into jazz, and she arranged for me to have some lessons with this guy, Patrick Stoyanovich. And I would say that these were the first actual one-on-one jazz lessons that I had. And our first lesson, he told me to bring the Charlie Parker Omni book.
Okay.
And in the context of that, he taught me, about how to take it with a grain of salt. Of course, the first thing, how everybody needs to know, the Omni book is filled with inaccuracies, and it's kind of like a Where's Waldo. You just have to, find the really bad ones, and write. But it was the first time that I'd ever looked at this language written down, and then somebody started to show me the theoretical things that were totally missing in my playing. This is where I really grasped the importance of like jazz language over 2-5-1s.
Okay.
And and going through and circling, it'd be like, okay, take this ornithology solo, and I want you to find all the 2-5s, and I want you to pick one or two and figure out how to play them in other keys. Like that was the beginning for me of that kind of a thing. It's a big moment.
Okay. How old were you when that was happening?
I think this is right about the same time that I saw that Mohawk picture. This is probably I don't know, 15, 16, something like that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I'm just doing a timeline here, a timeline of Zach Brock. But
that's dangerous.
But so you started to learn a little bit about bebop, and then how did you manage to develop? Well, just keep that developing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my, I would say the foundation of my actual deliberate development in that area had to do with working on transcriptions and analyzing them.
Okay.
I didn't do a ton of them. I really didn't. But even if you just do one, that's enough. That's enough to build an entire foundation of, your understanding.
Totally.
Yeah.
You would do whole solos then. You would learn like a couple of whole.
Yeah, but I mean, there were Charlie Parker solos, so the recorded ones, because of the limitations of the recordings at the time, were super short. That's one of the